Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading White Women Get Ready, How Healing Post-Traumatic Mistress Syndrome Leads to Anti-Racist Change. This is a book I have been reading through for some months now, a little bit at a time. If you are interested in reading it, you can get copies attached here. Restorying. The stories we tell ourselves are a source of our power, just as the stories we neglect and the silences we protect have often been used against us. The wicked webs want us to abandon our pasts as shameful, to leave our histories neglected for others to misuse. As status quo and passing white ladies, there is much to reclaim and work with. We have much to re-story. In a world replete with white people upholding racism, projects like the Braden Anti-Racist Organizer Training Program, the Legacy Quilt Project, and the White Anti-Racist Ancestry Project help us access and tell other stories. Going deeper with these stories can support us to get clearer about how our white anti-racist ancestors learned and unlearned their racism, leveraged their power and access, navigated solidarity and healing, and reclaimed their humanity and interconnected ways of being. Once upon a time, 19th century sisters Sarah and Angelina Grimke refused to forfeit the God territory. Serious about reclaiming spiritual integrity from both racism and patriarchy, they created theological arguments for the abolition of slavery while also refusing to silence their voices when they were told to shut up by white men. The Grimke sisters grew up as part of the Charleston slave-holding aristocracy and were some of the only, if not the only, Southern white women to condemn the institution of slavery and fight for real racial equality, a politic even many abolitionists were opposed to. Once upon a time, Jessie Daniel Ames from Texas organized other Southern white women against lynching. After first organizing as suffragettes, Ames realized the failures of white women's organizing in addressing racial issues. In 1930, she founded the Association of Southern Women for the Prevention of Lynching, bringing attention to the hypocrisy of justifying lynching based on the supposed rape of white women by African American men, which very seldom actually occurred. Ames wrote 2 books on anti-lynching and petitioned law enforcement to take an anti-lynching pledge. Ames offers us lessons from her powerful and courageous organizing of white women, and also from her missteps. Her organization excluded African American women and ultimately opposed federal anti-lynching laws in favor of state ones. Once upon a time, Southern writer Lillian Smith used her words and actions to fight against segregation and analyze the pathological disease of whiteness. In addition to her acclaimed works, Strange Fruit, a 1944 novel, and Killers of the Dream, a 1948 autobiographical work, she wrote in support of Brown v. the Board of Education, and, along with her lifetime partner, Paula Schnelling, began a literary magazine that invited both Black and white writers to be critical of Southern injustices. Smith also leveraged her inherited wealth as a white person, becoming the owner and director of Laurel Falls Camp for Girls, founded by her father. As a director, Smith created a progressive space for white girls to critically examine the status quo. Once upon a time, Virginia Foster Durr was not deterred. The fact that one of Durr's grandfathers had been a member of the Ku Klux Klan and the other had enslaved people did not dissuade Durr from becoming a skilled, strategic, anti-racist organizer. Her long legacy began in support of FDR's New Deal and in helping found the Southern Conference for Human Welfare, an interracial group before interracial was cool. In the 1940s, she lobbied to abolish the poll tax, ran for U.S. Senate on the progressive ticket, supported SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and housed and fed freedom riders. Perhaps most significant is the legal, financial, and moral support she and her husband, attorney Clifford Durr, contributed to the civil rights movement. Along with representing Claudette Colvin, the Durrs arranged for Rosa Parks to attend Highlander Folk School, where Parks was trained in strategic nonviolent action. The Durrs stayed in relationship with Parks, bailing her out of jail after she was arrested in the act that initiated the Montgomery bus boycott. Durr understood the function of white saviorism and paternalism and believed that white activists should be cautious of assuming leadership in case it be seen as whites giving rights to Black people, who were only claiming what already belonged to them. Once upon a time, Joan Trumpauer Mulholland staunchly rejected the racism of her upbringing in Virginia, even to the point where it is purported she was examined for mental illness. In her late teens and early 20s, Mulholland was part of a wave of Black-led youth activism. Her commitment to solidarity as a freedom rider saw her and her compatriots arrested and sent to the infamous Mississippi Parchman Penitentiary, where she served 2 months on death row. Her challenge to Southern social norms included integrating the historically Black Tougaloo College and participating in the 1963 Woolworth lunch counter sit-ins in Jackson, Mississippi, along with 13 other activists. Once upon a time, Braden embraced her white Southern identity for antiracism. She didn't let herself off the hook, and she didn't let others off either, using her journalistic skills and insider status to advance the anti-racist cause. Born in 1924, Braden held a deep love and compassion for white Southerners. Despite being cut off and despised by family, friends, and most of her beloved community in Louisville, Kentucky, she remained committed to the Southern struggle and to organizing white people within multiracial efforts. Over her long life, she made numerous contributions to anti-racism, economic justice, labor organizing, peace work, civil rights, and civil liberties, and worked closely with many historically renowned civil rights activists, including Ella Baker and Fred Shuttlesworth, among others. Braden, along with her husband Carl, is perhaps best known for undermining racist institutions by buying and selling a house in a white neighborhood to Andrew and Charlotte Wade, a black family during 1915 Southern segregation. After the house was bombed, thankfully no one was harmed, presumably by white neighbors who had already unleashed threats and violence on the Wades' home, Anne and Carl Braden were accused by the county prosecutor of being masterminds of a communist plot to incite race wars. These insinuations followed them for the next 2 decades, but Anne Braden was undeterred, continuing her anti-racist activism up until 3 days before her death in 2006. Her mentorship of younger activists links to my life. In the 1980s, she was one of several civil rights educators who encouraged PISAB's founders, Dr. Jim Dunn and Ron Chisholm, the organization that helped mentor me in my analysis of racism. Once upon a time, Mab Segrest, an anti-racist lesbian feminist writer and activist, chronicled her work with North Carolinians against racist and religious violence in Memoir of a Race Traitor. Segrest challenged and expelled elements of the North Carolina Ku Klux Klan in the 1980s. A Southerner originally from Alabama, Segrest's intersectional approach understood and named the ways sexism, racism, homophobia, and classism work together long before other white folks were embracing intersectional praxis. Particularly poignant to me is how she unpacks her family's racist legacy, as well as the tender interpersonal relationships with family members, as she evolves within anti-racist queer organizing. The stories we tell ourselves matters, and it matters that we take responsibility for both our greatness and our flaws. Catherine Fossil in Subversive Southerner, Anne Braden and the Struggle for Racial Justice in the Cold War South, writes about Braden's internal dilemma. As a newspaper editor, Braden went back and forth about how much to focus on the contributions of white folks. To what extent should she publish the examples of a very small number of white Southerners, especially in the midst of large-scale Black leadership? While highlighting Black struggle and resistance was never a question, ultimately Braden decided that celebrating even the smallest acts of resistance by white people was important to give other people examples and encouragement. I have come to a similar conclusion. My predecessors never acted in a vacuum, and their work was constantly impacted by the Black, Indigenous, and other people of color they worked with, for, and alongside. Mine isn't either. This book would not have been possible without the generosity, wisdom, and criticisms of the many Black and brown folks I've lived, worked, and played besides. Their work and stories are valuable. Yet, those are their stories. We need more examples of white settlers trying and failing and trying again. We need more stories of anti-racist white folks staying out with the fight despite the steep obstacles and temptations to opt out. We need more stories of us standing in solidarity by those who realize that harm to another is also harm against ourselves. Attached.